I remember it being a long, tiring night. I was the only surgeon on duty at the school hospital, and after finishing a grueling operation, I was headed down to the basement for a quick break. It was well past midnight, and the hospital was eerily quiet. As I stepped into the dimly lit elevator, there was just one other person inside, a woman. I exchanged a few casual words with her as the elevator started its descent. We talked about the late hour and the usual small talk that one makes in such situations. But then, something unusual happened. As the elevator reached the floor and the doors began to slide open, I noticed another woman waiting to step in. Without thinking much, I quickly extended my arm to block the doors and pressed the button for the highest floor. The woman who was waiting outside looked surprised, almost taken aback. She turned to me with a disapproving expression and said, "Hey, that was really rude. Why didn't you let that woman in? It's late, and we should all be considerate, you know?" I hesitated for a moment, not sure how to explain myself. My actions might have seemed impolite, but there was a reason behind them that I couldn't keep to myself any longer. I took a deep breath and said, "I'm really sorry, but that woman out there, the one I didn't let in, she was the one I just operated on, and she didn't make it. She passed away while I was trying to save her. Did you happen to notice the red wristband she was wearing?" The woman's expression changed from annoyance to understanding as the weight of my words sank in. The red wristband was a simple yet vital identifier we used in the hospital to indicate patients who were in critical condition or undergoing surgery. I knew it was hard to spot in the dim light, and many people might not even know its significance. She looked at me with a compassionate smile, her initial irritation now replaced by empathy. "I'm so sorry for your loss," she said softly. "I didn't notice the wristband, but I understand why you did what you did. It must be incredibly tough for you." As the elevator continued its ascent, she reached out and gently patted my shoulder, a gesture of support that meant more to me than she could ever know. We both knew that in my line of work, not every patient could be saved, but it never got any easier to accept. The elevator finally reached the highest floor, and the doors opened once more. The understanding woman stepped out, and as she did, she turned to me and said, "Take care, doctor. You're doing important work, and sometimes tough decisions need to be made." I nodded my appreciation, still carrying the weight of the night's events on my shoulders. But her understanding had provided some comfort, a reminder that even in the most challenging moments, there could be kindness and empathy. As the elevator doors closed, I saw that she was also wearing a red wristband. This happened when I was still living in Sacramento, California. I was a single dad, doing my best to provide a safe and comfortable home for my young daughter, Lily. We rented a quaint old house on the outskirts of town. It looked like the perfect place for us, a fresh start after the difficult times we'd been through. Little did we know it held a terrifying secret. The house was charming, but it had an eerie atmosphere. There were strange creaking noises in the night and a constant feeling of being watched. I thought it was just our imagination playing tricks on us, but then I met our neighbor, an elderly woman named Mrs. Anderson. Mrs. Anderson was a sweet elderly grandma who lived next door. She seemed friendly, and she often came over to chat. One evening, as Lily and I sat on the porch, Mrs. Anderson began to tell us about the history of our house. She explained that the previous owner, a kind old grandma, had died in the bathtub. I shuddered at the thought of it, but I didn't want to scare Lily, so I tried to change the subject. As weeks passed, strange things started happening. Lily claimed she saw a shadowy figure in the restroom. I dismissed it as a child's overactive imagination, but deep down, I couldn't ignore the unsettling feeling that something was not right. Almost every day, my daughter tells me about an old lady staring at her inside the mirror every time she goes to use the restroom. One night, I was jolted awake by the sound of running water. I rushed to the bathroom to find the bathtub faucet turned on full blast and water overflowing onto the floor. I quickly turned it off, my heart racing. There was no logical explanation for it, and I was a person who never believed in ghosts. This one time, while I was in the living room doing some of my work online, I heard water running, and it sounded like my daughter was playing in the restroom. I walk to the restroom and tell her to shut off the water, but when I get there, to my horror, the lights are off. But I can see the light that was in the hallway. It was an old lady lying on the bathtub with her long hair sticking out of the bathtub, and when I turned on the light, it was gone as if my eyes were playing tricks. I got scared and ran to my room to see my daughter sleeping. My heart beats so fast, and I think about what I just experienced. I confided in Mrs. Anderson about our eerie experiences, and she nodded knowingly. She told us that many tenants had come and gone from that house, all reporting strange and frightening occurrences. It seemed that the old grandma's spirit was restless, unable to find peace. A few more months passed, and the occurrences only became more frequent and intense. I couldn't bear to see the fear in Lily's eyes, and I knew it was time to leave that haunted house behind. We found a new, happier place to call home, far away from the old grandma's restless spirit. As we packed up our belongings and drove away from that cursed house, I couldn't help but look back one last time. I hoped that the next family who moved in would find a way to free the old grandma's spirit from her torment. But for us, we were finally free from the terrifying presence that had haunted our home for too long. I never imagined that our lives would take such a dark and twisted turn. My wife and I, along with our young son, had become a family constantly trapped in a whirlwind of arguments, yelling, and bickering. It felt like our once happy home had been swallowed by a storm of negativity. I never would have thought it would end like this. One fateful day, it all went from bad to worse. Our heated arguments had become a daily routine, and on that particular day, they reached a boiling point. Out of sheer anger and desperation, my wife decided to end her own life. I was left in shock, standing there in our once shared bedroom, unable to comprehend the devastating reality, just standing there watching her dead body. As I tried to come to terms with the tragedy, my focus shifted to our young son. He was just a sweet, innocent boy of 5, caught in the crossfire of our relentless fights. Yet, as I grieved the loss of his mother, I noticed something strange about him. He never complained or cried for her, not even once. It was baffling to me, and I couldn't help but worry about how this was affecting him. "Son, why aren't you calling out for Mommy?" I asked him, my voice trembling with a mix of grief and concern. "Most little boys would want their mommy to be with them. Tell me what's bothering you." He looked at me with his wide, innocent eyes and a small, curious smile. "I'm fine, Daddy," he replied in his soft, childlike voice. "I was just curious why you're always carrying Mommy on your back." His words hit me like a ton of bricks. I was taken aback, not sure I had heard him correctly. "Carrying Mommy on my back? What do you mean, son?" With a gentle nod of his head, he explained, "Every night when you think I'm asleep, I see you carry Mommy on your back to my room, and when you walk out, Mommy always kisses me goodnight, then she walks back to you." I was in shock and shaking, but at the same time, tears welled up in my eyes as I realized the truth of what my son was saying. In the midst of all our conflicts, my boy had seen the love and longing that I had for his mother, even when I couldn't express it in our troubled relationship. It was his innocence and pure heart that showed me how much I missed her. From that moment on, we found a way to heal together. My son and I shared stories about his mother, remembering the good times and the love we had shared as a family. We found solace in knowing that, despite our flaws and the pain we had caused each other, our love for her was something that could never be taken away. As the years passed, our home gradually transformed from a place of turmoil to one filled with love, laughter, and understanding. I made sure my son knew how much his mother had meant to me, even if I hadn't been able to show it when she was still alive. And I kept her memory alive, not just in our hearts but in our daily lives as well. In the end, it was the innocence and honesty of a young child that helped us heal and rebuild our lives. My son's observation, though heartbreaking, became a turning point, reminding me of the love I had once shared with my wife, and the love I still held for her in my heart. We may have lost her, but we found a way to carry her with us in a different way, as a cherished memory that could never be forgotten. A few years ago, my boyfriend's brother and his friends invited me to join them on a fishing trip to a remote, deserted place by a peaceful lake. It sounded like a fun adventure, so I eagerly agreed to tag along. Little did I know that this trip would lead to a strange and unforgettable encounter. We set up our fishing gear near the edge of the lake, casting our lines and patiently waiting for the fish to bite. The sun was beginning to set, casting a warm orange glow over the water. The quietness of the surroundings was only interrupted by the chirping of crickets and the occasional splash from our fishing lines. As we sat there, my boyfriend's brother and his friends suddenly pointed towards the middle of the lake. There was something out there, moving slowly through the water. At first, we couldn't make out what it was, but as it got closer, we could see it more clearly. It looked like a moose at first, with its large body and long legs. However, something about it was terribly wrong. Instead of hooves, it had human feet and a human face. My heart began to race as I tried to comprehend what I was seeing. The creature came closer, its dark, human-like eyes fixating on us. We all exchanged nervous glances, feeling a deep sense of unease. None of us could explain what we were witnessing. It was like something out of a bizarre horror movie, and I felt a shiver run down my spine. My boyfriend's brother, sensing the tension, finally broke the silence, saying, "Hey, come on, let's go grab something to eat. Who wants to go with me?" The others quickly agreed, eager to put some distance between ourselves and this strange, otherworldly creature that now stood in the middle of the lake. We hastily gathered our fishing gear, leaving behind our eerie encounter with the bizarre creature. The walk back to our campsite was filled with anxious whispers and speculations about what we had just seen. No one could make any sense of it, and we all hoped that a good meal would help us forget. Once we were safely back at our campsite, we lit a fire and cooked up a simple dinner, but the incident at the lake still weighed heavily on our minds. We couldn't help but wonder about the mysterious, human-faced and human-footed creature we had encountered. As the night went on, we shared ghost stories and tried to laugh away our unease. But deep down, we all knew that what we had seen that day would remain etched in our memories forever. It was a chilling reminder that there are still unexplained mysteries lurking in the remote corners of the world, and some encounters are better left unexplored. I've always been a curious person. So when I heard about my uncle's plan to attend a shaman funeral, I couldn't resist the opportunity to join him. The thought of witnessing something so unusual and mysterious was just too tempting to pass up. Little did I know that this journey would take me on an extraordinary adventure I'd never forget. We embarked on a long and dusty journey to a remote village deep within the heart of the Amazon rainforest. The shaman funeral we were about to witness was said to be a unique and ancient tradition that had been passed down through generations. Upon our arrival, we were welcomed by the villagers, who seemed to be a mix of excitement and reverence. The air was thick with the scent of burning incense, and the rhythmic beat of drums filled the atmosphere, creating an eerie yet strangely enchanting atmosphere. The highlight of the funeral was the way they prepared the deceased for the afterlife. The deceased was laid out on a wooden platform, with ropes carefully tied around their hips, arms, shoulders, and legs. These ropes served a very peculiar purpose: to prevent the body from rising. You see, in their belief, when someone passed away and the temperature got too high, the limbs of the dead would start to move upward. To avoid this, they tied the ropes to keep the body in place. As the day turned into night, the villagers gathered around the platform, lighting candles and chanting incantations. It was as if the whole world had become still, and we were all caught in a surreal moment. Then came the most unusual part of the ritual, feeding time. The shaman approached the platform, holding a chicken in his hands. He placed the chicken just in front of the deceased person's head. The villagers continued their chants, their voices growing louder and more intense. I watched in awe as the impossible happened. Slowly, the deceased person's arm began to move. It lifted, defying the ropes that held it in place, and reached behind the head to grasp the chicken. It was an eerie and surreal sight. The shaman and the villagers remained undisturbed, their chants never wavering. The dead body started to eat the chicken with an almost mechanical, lifeless motion. It was a sight that sent shivers down my spine. The villagers continued their chants, as if they were channeling the spirits of the deceased, guiding their actions. As the last morsel of chicken disappeared, the arm of the deceased slowly descended back to its original position. It was as if it had been puppeteered by some unseen force. The villagers let out a collective sigh of relief, as if they had accomplished a sacred task. The shaman approached me and explained the significance of this ritual. They believed that by feeding the deceased, they were ensuring a peaceful transition to the afterlife, preventing the spirit from restlessness or wandering. It was a unique way of honoring and bidding farewell to their loved ones. As the night wore on, the villagers continued their celebration, sharing stories of the departed and dancing around a bonfire. I couldn't help but feel a deep sense of respect for their ancient traditions and the profound connection they had with the spirit world. This shaman funeral was a journey into the unknown, an experience that left me with a lasting impression. It made me question the boundaries of life and death and the mysterious forces that bind us to the world beyond. It was a night I would never forget, and it opened my eyes to the profound and mystical beliefs that exist in the far corners of our world.